بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحضور الكرام, ladies and gentlemen, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This session we will be discussing the session in the English language. So I hope nobody has anything against that. I would like to, first of all, I'd like to introduce the need of this session to have at the Jeddah Economic Forum. The Jeddah Economic Forum is talking about youth and growth. And as you grow the private sector and as you grow the economy, you produce more jobs. And in this session, we would like to find out how in these jobs that are going to be created, we are going to be able to introduce more women and hopefully more women in the decision-making level. And I would like to first introduce to you, who am I introducing? Noura Alturki. Noura Alturki is, I think, a board of Nesma company, which is a large, diverse company here in Saudi Arabia with constructions and manufacturing. Noura is also a graduate from, we are proudly, I love to say this, Noura is a young Saudi girl that graduated from Brown University in the US and Oxford University in the UK. So, and she is a woman in Saudi Arabia, so that's my first thing to say about her. Then Noura has had many experiences. She worked in the Khadija bint Khuwailid Center. There is a women center here that joins with the Jeddah Chamber of Commerce that works mostly on working women and business women on the legislations and regulations. Then she went to a consultancy office called the Monitor Group, where she also worked there for a few years, also focused a lot on gender issues. And today she works in the family business. Noura, can you please? I don't have, they told me to introduce you, Noura. So you can introduce Anne. You will introduce Anne. I've done my part. He will be introducing. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry again, not well prepared. I'm really sorry, but I'd like to introduce the ambassador to the EU here because I think you came out with this idea, and I think thanks to you and your organization and your embassy, we have been able to have the chance to discuss such an important subject. We would like to thank your embassy and the EU for giving us the chance to participate in such an amazing, actually, panel. Thank you.
السلام عليكم، مساء الخير. سوف نتحدث بالإنجليزي ولكن يسعدني أن أرحب بكم قبل كل شيء بالعربي. نحن في جدة، نحن في مدينة عروس البحر الأحمر، وفي في شيء من أهم الأحداث ومنتديات اقتصادية في هذه المنطقة. مرة أخرى شكرا كله على الحضور. وهذه المناسبة علينا أن نبدأ مش من أيها السادة والسادات، أيها سادات وسادة. سادة لأن الموضوع الذي نتحدث حوله مهم لكل، مهم لكل المجتمع، مهم لكل الناس، والنساء أهم جزء منا. Once again, thank you very much for your attention and for attending this session. We at the delegation of the European Union, we had for some time, an idea to organize an event on the role of women in the economy, in the Saudi economy, and in employment in general, employment opportunities. And I would like to thank organizers of Jeddah Economic Forum for being so forthcoming to our idea. We have invited Konrad Adenauer Foundation from Germany to be our partner in this event. That's why you will have an opportunity to listen to later on to Dr. Anne Wichels-Schnieber, who is brought to us from Germany by Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Foundation. But before that, let me just share with you a few maybe initial ideas. As you know, employment, of course, is important everywhere. It's important in Europe, it's important in America, it's important in Saudi Arabia. In Europe, we actually think it's one of the most important issues we have. Our target under 2020 horizon in Europe is to have 75% of people between the age of 20 and 40 and 64 employed by 2020. For the time being, we are almost there because we are 74% of men employed and close to that 71, 72 of women. But of course, when you go further to the statistics, then you discover that among women, if you take people full-time employed, then we are not that successful. It's only 53%. But when we also look at the employment of the young people, then the challenge is very big. Challenge is very big everywhere, not only in Saudi Arabia, also in the European Union. What sometimes frightens people, even from talking about the issue, is statistics. Statistics say that we have 55% of unemployed people in Spain, 40% of unemployed people in Greece, Italy, Ireland. But when you look at the same statistics from the point of view of young people, if you take this as a proportion of young people between 20 and 24 years old, then it's not that bad, because when we take it as a proportion of young people, then the same figures, which are 55, 40, or 30, are just 13, 12, and 8. This just speaks for itself, that young people really want to work, they wish to take a challenge, and they do so. Of course, you know that the most important thing are not only incentives, not only what the state can do to find more opportunities, of course, for women, for ladies to work, but also determination and commitment. And I think this determination and commitment is already there, not only in the European Union, but also, of course, in the Saudi society. When we think in Europe what should be done for young people to be employed, so basically, and especially for young ladies to be employed, then two things are usually mentioned. One are incentives given by the state, either loans or, business opportunities, bank guarantees. And the second thing is, of course, childcare opportunities, because young women very often have children, and they need, in order to work, they need to have these guaranteed. So within the European Union, we have set some targets on that. So we decided that we would like to have at least 33% of all children from 0 to 3 years old covered by the free or affordable childcare, and at least 90% of children from 3 to school year under the same target. Where we are now, so 10 of our member states out of 28 are already there. But of course others are striving to achieve the same goal. So how we can help as the European Union, how we can really be helpful to the Saudi business community, to the Saudi partners, when we talk about assisting creation of jobs. I think our private sector is really very active on that. In every member state of the European Union, we have of course, business organizations, chambers, but also NGOs, working on looking into the phenomenon, on looking into what should be done to make things better. So we have certain experiences on, of course, small and medium enterprises, because we believe that this is the most important driver for job creation, and I think it's definitely the same for Saudi Arabia. And here I would see lots of opportunities also for you to come to Europe, to see what our different member states are doing, what we can offer, what you can learn, and how you can benefit from our experience, which is different, but still there is some you can take for you and benefit. And the last, I think, notion is that we are all part of the same human family, and we are there not only to help, but first of all to share and to assist you in this very, very important process. So I will end on this notion. مرة أخرى شكرا جزيلا على اهتمامكم وسوف نتواصل تعاوننا في المستقبل. شكرا جزيلا.
Good. Hi. A very warm welcome to all of you. I hope all of you have enjoyed the same excellent food as I have about half an hour ago before many of you came in. Thank you so much for attending this session that I'm going to conduct together with Noura here, who will speak a little bit later. And thank you so much to the EU delegation and to the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for inviting me to speak on this very special occasion. My name is Wichels-Schnieber. I very briefly work with Reynolds Associates, which is a global company for executive search. So basically I help global companies recruit people to their management teams. And the reason why I stand here to speak about this, or why am I qualified to speak about this, is that female participation in management and work is obviously a very large topic and a very important topic for many of those companies in the Western world, as much as it starts to become a topic right here. And I would like to elaborate a little bit more on that from a European perspective. Diversity, as you probably have heard, is something in German we call is ein geflügeltes Wort, a word with wings. Basically, everyone uses it because it's on vogue, it's in fashion, everyone wants to be diverse. But do companies really know what they're talking about when they talk about diversity? Humans usually work the same, no matter if in Saudi Arabia or in Germany or in any other part of the world. We like to be around people that are like us. And diversity contradicts that concept. And it's something I notice every day in my work. So companies come to us and tell me, I need to recruit for this position. Please, can you give us female candidates? Many, many, many of them. And we say, of course we can. So we try to find very competent, excellently qualified women with great personalities. And we present them. And in the interviews, they said, yeah, she's great, but somehow she doesn't really... She has somewhat of a different perspective. I don't know if she's going to fit in. And sometimes they don't understand that diversity actually means overcoming your own perspective of thinking, this is somebody I want to work with, he thinks the same, but really taking someone who will criticize you, who will bring a different perspective, who doesn't think like you. I want to take a step back and just talk about diversity in general as a concept, because obviously it includes much more than just gender diversity. It includes age, so taking in older people in your workforce. It includes people, including people with disabilities. It includes people from different geographies and ethnicities. It includes people from different religions and many more, actually. So diversity is actually an infinite concept where you can add different educational backgrounds, high school or university. Your marital status will absolutely influence your perspective on things, even more so if you have children or not. How intelligent you are, what your hair color is, what your financial background is, what type of personality you are. I mean, look at companies where there's all introverts or all extroverts, how different that is and how different it tends to be to work together. What hobbies they have. So many different things actually include diversity, and we want to focus today on the gender piece. But I think the core question is, as much as diversity is something that appeals to us, why do we actually why do we need it? Why should we make our companies and our management teams diverse? And there's actually three cases one can make. The first one is easy. It's the image case. We've already talked about it. It's somewhat cool. It's en vogue. It's nice if you can put up pictures from people you know that have different hair colors and skin colors. That gives you a positive image. Secondly, there is very obvious a compliance case in most of the Western countries. So not only is there a Universal Declaration of Human Rights that allows people to pick a profession they want to do and go where they want to do, but there's also national anti-discrimination laws. So for example, in Germany, you would have to advertise a job always to people of different genders as well as of people with disabilities very explicitly. The third one is actually the most important one, and I want to elaborate a little bit more on that, which is a business case. It's been proven by many studies actually that diverse teams are associated with a higher profitability for the company. And that has different reasons, but I'm just going to show you an excerpt of a study called Women Matter that McKinsey published over the past years a couple of times, showing that companies that have a higher proportion of women, and this holds true here for the top management especially, have a better financial performance in different dimensions. One, they have an average higher return on equity, as you can see, by approximately 10%. Looking at the EBIT, the earning before income and taxes, interest and taxes, you actually have an increase of almost 50% in your EBIT when you compare companies at the top end of the percentage of women in their management and the industry average. That means those are the one on the gray pillar people are companies that do have women, but not as many, far not as many as the one on the, I think it's a pink pillar actually. Thirdly, it also influences the stock price growth positively to have more women in your team, and the same numbers exist also for different types of diversity, be it geographically or ethnicity or other areas. This is something, when I first saw this a couple of years ago, I found this highly impressive, and I think most people, when they hire women, they do not think about this. They basically buy someone in who will eventually increase their stock price. That's a pretty cool and easy mechanism to do it. Why is it that those diverse teams enhance the profitability? There's obviously several reasons. The first one, accessing the full potential of your people. People who are in a diverse environment where they can thrive with their personality as they are, with their background what they are, you will basically get the best out of the people you have instead of potentially leaving them with a kind of mid-tier performance. They will want to learn continuously. There was much more openness for new ideas, all those things. The second one is very important, I think in Germany as much as in Saudi, accessing the full potential of your nation. Germany, like Saudi Arabia at the moment, has an issue and a lack of qualified staff to fill, especially positions in management. And Germany decided, you know, where we're going to get those people? Well, let's look at who's there. And then you find 50% women in your nation, and you think, you know, why don't we leverage that potential much more than we previously have? Thirdly, there's obviously a much stronger market and customer focus. Having 50% of the customers you serve are women, usually sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on your business. And helping understand those customers gets them gets you much closer to them and will actually improve the measures and the products you make. Thirdly, you better attract and retain your top talent. It's also been proven in several studies that especially young people are looking for diversity in companies and find it much more attractive to work in companies that promote that concept versus companies that are very homogeneous. Could you get me some water? Thirdly, there's an increase in productivity and performance. While initially there might be conflicts, or more conflicts than with a homogeneous team, in the end there is, people feel better respected, they work together much better. It's just much easier to work in a diverse team. Not always easier, but more productive to work in a diverse team because you minimize risks, you get more ideas. So those are several factors to be taken into account. So, looking at where we stand, Europe in general has managed to bring women into the workforce quite a bit. So as you can see, if you take the workforce of companies overall, there's, here it says 37%, I think it's somewhere close to 40% women in the overall workforce. The issue that the EU is currently struggling with is actually to bring those women to the top. As you can see, the likelihood of men to be promoted within a company is much, much higher than to be promoted for women, and you end up with only 2% of women on average in CEO positions. And that's the big challenge for European or Western companies right now. Looking at the status quo, as I said again in Europe, we're still somewhat disappointed at the numbers because looking at the business case, that, you know, making women take part brings you so much more profitability, you ask yourself, why do people not act on that immediately? And then the answer to that is obviously, one, you need to put in measures, and secondly, this is a step-by-step process, just as it is a step-by-step process in your country. We have quite a bit of a difference in the northern countries where gender equality is even much more prominent than in others. We're at about 20% if you look at the executive committees on the left. Germany is doing very badly with 3%. And then you can see that every time a woman gets hired into the senior management of a large corporation, this number goes up to 10% because it's one woman. So we're talking only about, you know, minor changes as well. What's interesting to see here is that it differs very much, the executive committees versus the corporate boards. The corporate boards, you actually do find quite a bit more women. This is often due to the fact that states have implemented policies, quota policies for corporate boards. Not yet for executive boards, because executive boards is, you know, more difficult to put a policy forcing a company on the composition of their management. But on corporate board it's different, and especially in Norway, that has the strongest policy on that, a quota of 40% by 2014, I think, so they were almost there. It's 35%. Interestingly, in Norway, that leads to the fact that as there's only few women so qualified for these positions, they're sitting on 10 or 15 boards and really have a lot to do and actually don't have any more time for their regular job. So they're kind of professional board members, or they become professional board members. They're called golden skirts. That's the term for these Norwegian women. The question now is why? Why haven't we come further? And I've put up this slide because I think this is really one of the things, at least in our countries, where we struggle. Women are usually in the minority still in meetings and boards, and there's a high skepticism on that what they say is actually true or valid, and women have to put in twice as much energy to get where actually a man can get with just a single piece of energy. There's obviously a lot more factors to it. There's multiple barriers, and this is just a broad overview and a selection. Double burden syndrome, so women have to balance family and work much more than men have to. the anywhere, anytime, anywhere performance model. So you're being expected to be at work full-time, otherwise your performance is not considered as strong. That's obviously not true. I have a daughter myself, she's 1 year old now, and I have never worked as efficiently in my life before as I do now. But I wasn't aware of that when I did not have children. So I was looking at women actually and saying, you know, they can't be working as productively as I am. Actually, the opposite is very true. And once you've made that experience, you will always come to hire women with children over potentially other candidates. There's an absence of role models. Many of the women at the top in Western companies, for example, do not have families. So it's difficult to see that it actually works. There's a tendency to network less effectively. Interestingly, that's actually much more thought by women than men, because networking, tactical networking, for example, as you do here on this conference, is something that's seen as more negatively by women, because they say, you know, networking is something positive. I don't want to do it just for business purposes. It's very interesting. So many different aspects contributing to the fact that we're not there yet. Some are extrinsic, and quite many actually also intrinsic by the women itself. Very briefly on Germany. There was a very recent study by the company Worth & Klein, Grant Thornton, and there were many headlines in the German newspapers stating Germany is worse in their gender diversity than the the Emirates, which was an outcome of the study, with only, I think, 27% of leadership teams at all having a woman in their things. I'm very briefly going to talk about the reasons in Germany that I'm currently experiencing myself, with a motherhood really being the biggest incision for people on the career path. There's external factors. So in Germany, it's uncommon to have nannies or private childcare, but instead people use a public daycare and give their child away. And there's a lack of daycare facilities. Only 10 to 20% of the actual need is covered. And there's a lot of women who want to work, but they just don't have the opportunity to have someone who takes care of their children, as long as they don't do that together with the father. There's government incentives. So right now, after having a child, the state pays you for 12 months, 60% of your salary. That's pretty attractive. So a lot of women now use that and stay home for a year, which is usually very difficult to just go out of your job for a year and then return, and then your job is still there, but you're being utilized in a different way potentially. Part-time employment is very common, especially on a permanent basis, and then the factor I previously announced kicked in terms of saying, oh, well, they're not performing as much as we are. And there's also a lack of employer support still and strategic planning. So few employers take the time to really think through and go up to the woman and say, you know, I need you to come back after 6 months or 3 months or whenever, because I need you here. But instead they listen, oh, okay, she's gone, so I won't count on her. There's parent-driven factors. There's a big controversial debate on what's the optimal mother role. And there's something called the Rabenmutter, the raven mother, which is the person that gives her child away to daycare. And then there's the other opposite, is the woman in the kitchen, who doesn't do anything than taking care of the children. It's a very absurd debate, actually, in Germany, which is a country where this debate should, you know, you should be tolerant towards however people want to do it. But there's not much tolerance. There's skepticism regarding external childcare. And also there's a lack of a lean-in attitude. And I can very much recommend you a book by Sheryl Sandberg, who wrote on women having to lean in if they want to make a career, just as much as anyone else needs to show commitment for whatever they want to achieve in a working context. Very briefly, how do you achieve diversity? And it's much more of an evolution and small steps than anything else. So first piece, do something against discrimination in the workplace. So promote equal opportunities. I mean, just a very blunt example, when German women started entering the military forces, there were no toilets for women. So they had to install toilets for women. That falls in that category. Secondly, group-specific support. Promote women's networks. I'm going to show you some examples. Give visibility to those groups that they're there, and give visibility not only to the groups, but also to the other employees. And thirdly, you can come to a company-wide culture change where diversity is really part of where you want to head and part of your company strategy and part of your business. I'm going to skip over this because it's too complicated. Just very briefly, management commitment from the very, very top is the most important factor of making diversity and especially more women in the workplace possible. If the CEO and the top management team want it, it's going to happen. Yeah? And only then it's going to happen. In addition, you need to be very clear on measuring where do you have women, where do you want to go, so set goals, just as in any business piece, so make it a part of your business. Use key performance indicators, measure them, look at them every quarter and see where you've gone, and think about measures how to get better on those. A couple of examples, just as a close. PricewaterhouseCoopers, on their homepage for diversity, they create a lot of visibility for real role models. So they show stories. For example, here is somebody called Allison. You can read more. She's a works full-time, she's a working mom, and is elaborating on how she's going to be able to do that at PricewaterhouseCoopers. McKinsey, a company I previously worked for, they host special women recruiting events to get the top talent out of that pool, explicitly to them, because many women think, you know, this is somewhat more of a man's job, it's a lot of working hours, I don't know if I fit in. And they will find the role models they otherwise don't find. Google sponsors a number of diversity networks. In the middle you find Google Women, you have something like the Black Googler Network. This is for the disability, for the blind people at Google, Hispanic Googlers. They also have something called Greyglers for older people in the workforce. And very lastly, a German bank in Diba started a trainee 50+ program for women, because obviously many women after childcare, they want to return, but they don't know how. And they go into a vocational traineeship if they're 50+ and just do the same thing. Quick excerpt and quick run through where we stand on the Western side, and I'm very keen to hear Noura's views and keen to discuss with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Maybe I'll push this back to this first slide or something so that, trying to do that? Okay. First off, I'd like to thank His Excellency the Ambassador for hosting us and for all the organizers of this event. It's really fascinating to hear Anne talk about this because it reminds us of all the ways that we are more similar than different. As I was listening to the examples and the anecdotes she shared, it reminded me a lot of some of the things that we here as women in Saudi Arabia go through, and I saw some nods in the audiences as well. Like, for example, the bathrooms. We face this, you know, the gender stereotypes about us judging one another. Oh, you work too hard, or you're not taking care of your children enough, and your children are going to be, you know, all these things. I hear women in Saudi discuss these on a regular basis. And the picture of the cat among the dogs, that one as well, you know, we had that when the women at the Chamber of Commerce first joined the board, and the question that was posed to them was, well, what did you achieve in your 8 years at the Chamber of Commerce? And I believe it was one of the board members who said, why don't you ask the men what they achieved? Why is it now only a concern about achievement now that women are on the board? So these kinds of situations that Anne talked about are very, very similar to the situation of women, and I think that once in a while we need a reminder of how similar we are more than different. I'd like to respond to a few of the points that Anne mentioned from the European Union perspective and talk about, in my opinion, the experience in Saudi Arabia. Beginning first with the concept of diversity. we sometimes forget, and I think it's important that we all remember too, that actually Saudi Arabia is a lot more diverse than we like to think, or that we remember. In terms of our workforce participation, it's not just Saudis versus non-Saudis. In a typical company, it is possible to have more than 50 nationalities all working together side by side. And I think that that is something that we need to acknowledge as part of the Saudi experience. With regards to women, here's a challenge, right? We need to first recognize that there is a diversity among women. And I think something that's so important, because when we talk about women in Arabic, we talk about al-mar'a as-Saudiya, right? As if she's one entity. And in English, al-mar'a as-Saudiya is translated as Saudi woman with an A. In English, they talk about women in Saudi Arabia, but still there is only one stereotype of what this woman is. And just only before coming up on stage, someone said to me, oh, you're going to be speaking about the perspectives of women in Saudi Arabia, but you're not a typical woman in Saudi. You know, I said, I realize that I'm not a typical woman in Saudi, but neither are you as a European living in Saudi Arabia. So why am I less Saudi than you are European? And I think that when we recognize that among women we're diverse, we can reach much better results with hiring women. Because the reasons why women are coming into the workforce differ depending on their experiences. There are women who are educated and there are women who are not. There are women who are poor and there are women who are rich. There are women who want to change the world and there are women who want to earn an income for their family. So the reason why they come in affects the outcome and the experience. And therefore, we need to take that in order to improve the experiences for women. In Saudi Arabia today, the focus has really been about job creation, right? It's been about how can we bring women into the workforce. And when we look at the demographics, my colleague and I were talking about this yesterday with regards to our company, Nesma. How do we integrate women more effectively into the workforce? And we stratified women as 3 levels. So the first level is at the labor level, right? These are women who possibly will work in factories or in maybe even retail, who are not very, very experienced, but are looking for a job that they can get trained on, and it's mostly manual labor. The experiences that they face are very different from the women who come from the top. Right, the women who Anne talked about in her presentation, who are representing, are representatives on boards and in management positions. And in Saudi Arabia, I think we can all agree that those women are very few. And that's why someone like me is perceived as, oh, you're not a typical woman. And I think that with them, a lot of them come in from Western educated, or maybe even educated in the best universities around the world. They might be getting international experience in global companies, and they might be coming in like myself from a family business, and so they get put into the top positions, and the struggles that they struggle with are the same struggles that Anne mentioned, which are, you know, realizing that we are a minority. How do we come across as confident and as powerful? How do we make sure that we have financial knowledge, right? These are the kinds of things that women at the top have to deal with, and obviously work-life balance. So the government, I think, is doing a very good job of focusing on bringing women into the labor positions in factories and in manufacturing jobs. And those women who are at the top are bringing themselves in, right? I mean, recently we have the case of the appointment of an executive at NCB Capital, which is an incredible achievement in Saudi Arabia for a woman to be at that level. But this was something that because she proves herself, and that's why she's in that position. But the middle, I think the third category is the most troubling. And those are the ones who represent the majority of women in Saudi Arabia, and over time they will continue to represent a larger portion. And these are the women who are college educated, mostly locally educated, and have a hard time coming into a job that's meaningful. And the challenges that we face even in our company at Nesma is how do we make their experience a lot more effective, and how do we integrate them? Keeping in mind the cultural barriers, the barriers from the women themselves, the structural challenges, and the challenges of other managers. right? We have, Anne mentioned that in order for a women's employment experience to be successful, the CEO must be convinced. But I would say that in Saudi Arabia, the bigger challenge is not the CEO, but the managers, right? When the manager is they have budgets and they've got deadlines, and then they have to deal with women who are seated in a separate office. A lot of the times, just having them not visibly in your face might say, you know what, I'll just give the job to a man. And so these are the kinds of challenges that we have to deal with at this middle level, is how do we make women more visible? And how do we convince managers and work with managers to get the women to be working in productive jobs? And I believe that a large part of that is that in the private sector today, I work in HR, so I know that this is in a lot of companies. We're not used to working with job descriptions and career path planning and policies and procedures and clear rules and regulations. And so when you have to manage from a distance, or when you have to manage people who are not like you or who are not in your face, you have to start doing much more planning. And so this is a struggle that I think companies in Saudi Arabia will have to deal with, not only when they hire more women, but when they hire more Saudis, right? Because Saudis are much more mobile, and they'll think about, where am I going to be in 5 years? So I think that a big challenge that we as a private sector face is, how do we plan more effectively for our human resources, whereas at the same time, there's so much need for anyone, right? We need people. So we're just looking at bringing them in, and we're not even having enough chance to think about how we're going to organize the platform for their growth. So I believe this is the first point I wanted to make regarding diversity, that we need to first acknowledge that there's a diverse range of women, and that each group of women needs a different type of intervention. The second point I wanted to make, also building off of Anne's presentation, was the business case for women. And I think that this is something that so far has not been really studied in Saudi Arabia in those words, or in that way. Yes, there has been somewhat of a business case, and I think it began with, historically, it's been more about we need women to service women, right? So therefore, we need female teachers. And so we will hire women as teachers because they are teaching female students. Another example would be in banks, where they are opening female branches to service female clients, and therefore we need women in. So that's been one driver of bringing women into the workforce, women servicing women. The second, and it's a bit more sophisticated, is about tapping into female customers. So companies that are in fast-moving consumer goods, that are in retail, that recognize, oh, my customer is a woman, so maybe if I hire women, I'll be able to understand that customer better, and from a business perspective, it will make me more of a profit and make me grow. So that has been happening in Saudi Arabia too, in companies like, I remember. When I was doing research with Khadija bint Khuwaylid Center, Savola had a case where they were hiring women. Companies like Unilever and Procter & Gamble definitely recognize that their customers are female, and so we need women to service the women. The next level is a lot more of a challenge, right? And I think that there's a leap here that needs to happen with making the argument that diversity as a conscious choice is good for business. Because so far we've been used to we have a diverse workforce because we need people and we'll bring everyone in. And I believe that where we are on this point right now is because we need the talent. Our focus really is about, let's become gender blind. You need a worker, well, it doesn't matter if they're a woman or a man, you need a worker, or you need an employee, or you need an employee, or you need a manager. So I think that that's where we are right now, and we might be here for a while longer, is just don't think about gender. And our HR manager is from Nesma is here with us, and when she talks to our companies and understands their recruitment needs, they'll say like, oh, I need a salesman, and he needs to be a man because, he needs to be able to go to the government agencies, and we deal with a lot of angry customers, and maybe a woman won't be able to deal with this angry customer. And she says, wait, let's just see what CVs we receive. Maybe you will find a female candidate who has all these skills that you require. And surely enough, we have cases where we've convinced successfully the CEO to hire a woman because she was qualified for the position and she held her own in the interview. So I believe that the transition to focusing on diversity will begin by first forgetting about diversity for a little bit and thinking more about talent. I know there are a lot of qualified people in the audience who can talk to a lot of these issues, so I'll end here because there are a lot of examples of what the government is doing in terms of daycares and other infrastructure issues, and I'm really keen to hear from all of you to help me in responding to the European Union case. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, first of all, I wanted to congratulate both of you and plus the head of European Union for their speech. My question goes to Noura Alturki. You said something about let's forget about gender, be gender blind. I wonder how you can do that. Why? Because I've been in the States and we had an issue of colorblind. And the more we talk about let's not be colorblind, we bring more color into the picture. So I'm not sure how you can think that way. So maybe you'll tell us more about what you mean by let's forget about gender blind.
Thank you. Thanks for helping me to clarify my point a bit more. Today in Saudi Arabia, there is a huge drive to bring women into the workforce. And that the ministry has been looking at how we can do this effectively. And so they've been looking at how to feminize certain jobs. So they say, okay, let's make the call center all women, because this one we will be able to bring women in. Or how about we turn this factory into a women-only factory, and that way we will bring women in. And I'm totally for this move, because I believe that this will be a way to bring women in. But when we talk about the diversity of the women's experiences, this example will not help all women. This tactic will not help all women. At certain levels, the employer needs to be gender blind in order to give women a chance. Because if I say in IT, for example, oh, I need a man, this is not a feminized job, that's not feminized by the government, then they will only hire men. And that missing middle of women who are qualified won't get that job because it hasn't been dictated that it should be a woman's job. So what I mean to say that at certain points, as HR professionals, we need to say to the CEO, don't think about it being a woman's job or a man's job, just think about what it is that you need in terms of skills. And then we will find the right candidate who will fit that requirement. And I keep referring to my colleague who is here, Ms. Sara Trabulsi, before joining Nesma, used to work in the industrial zone, and she used to interview a lot of welders and carpenters, and so if someone had said, oh, no, this job is a man's job, she wouldn't have gotten that job. They had to look at her as a person and decide she is qualified and she is capable to do it. So that's what I mean by sometimes we need to switch off the gender lens.
Hi, I'm Mohammed Bakhreba from Call of Culture. In the recent study which has been published by Harvard Business School, that most of the businessmen in the world, or have been in this study, prefer to work with men rather than women, which I don't agree. So if we concentrate on the statement that they prefer, so it's more of a culture rather than performance. So if we can switch the culture of a business and build in, as you said, Noura, if we can build in a culture in the company that towards women and diversity and giving more chances to the women, that's going to be something very important. You also have mentioned family culture when it comes to responsibility. You can, I mean, the women in Saudi Arabia, perhaps in the Arab world, they are more oriented to take care of the kids, so they don't have much time. Perhaps the businessmen will think, because you have more obligation to family, your performance is not going to be all right. So if we can also promote responsibilities of the cultures, of the family, in the culture, in the communities, this will also impact diversity. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentations. every time you spoke, I see myself everywhere. On every slide, I was there. So in companies also, it is important to start from the top positions down. In Saudi, we have found that men tend, as Noura said, decide where the positions are better suited for women. And I hate this word, it says better suited. And when they decide on what is better suited, women are not there with them to participate in that decision. So this creates, and then it becomes something like, you know, we're choosing the jobs because we want to be more protective over you women, so we don't want anybody, you know, it's a protection thing that we are actually doing. And I've also noticed that women that also sometimes, this is one point, and then the other one is when women come on the top, then you also might have an issue because sometimes women that have reached the top and taken so much of their energy to actually make it to the top, they tend to become very man-woman. So they sometimes feel they don't have the courage to push for more women because they feel it might be a burden on the company, so they prefer as not to support. And I see a lot of this. So when we sit down and have some conversations and I come in and I'm turning into a feminist without noticing. And sometimes I worry myself. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a feminist. But maybe I am. And sometimes because men tend to be those bulldogs you're talking about, and they look at you as like, come on, not every day, we're going to talk about your women. Come on, there must be some other subject we can discuss, you know. You continuously come in to discuss your women issues. And what I would like to see is to have, in education, more men educated on how to accept having a different gender work with them. And not just getting the women ready to move into the man's world.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. It doesn't even happen in Europe. So, I mean, the number of male people in educational jobs or teacher jobs is still very, very low. But I think it would be a great way to make them feel, or put them into situations, you know, that make them feel differently. And I recently spoke to someone who told me about a situation where he was the only man in the room with 9 other women. And for him, it was an enlightening moment because he said it was the first time that he understood how most women must have felt or must feel in a general management situation. So that's maybe something that should be a mandatory exercise. I wanted to come on another point that you said, because it's about the job is more suitable and giving characteristics or traits or stereotypes of women and associating them with jobs. A lot of this, from my experience, is also intrinsic in the women because they feel that they might not be qualified for a position. So, example is HR. In Germany already, even in the top management, you find a lot of women in HR positions. But how many CFOs are female? Very few. Not because they're not qualified to do it, but because there's still a stereotype that associates that it's a tough thing, it's with numbers, you know, it's the core of the business. So, oh, maybe if I make a mistake there, it's going to be kind of a double or 3 times a mistake. There's a very interesting campaign on that, again, also by the Lean In Foundation from Sheryl Sandberg, who wrote the book that I was talking about. And it's to ban the word bossy in schools in the US. So basically there's a lot of women and short movies saying, you know, why, if a man is a leader, why is a woman bossy? Why isn't she also a leader? And I find that highly interesting because that's about cultivating change, what Chris Hughes said this morning, instead of teaching it, I think.
Thank you. Shagad? Yeah. Hi. I just wanted to add something about this, about the caricature, about this better be good thing. Now I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not advanced and board member in company or something like that. I'm part of 2 young, very young startups. One is dominated by female. I'm a researcher there. The other is dominated by male. Actually, I'm the only female there. My family make a joke out of it. They call me Smurfetti because everybody's a guy in the company and only the female one. I haven't gone through this better be good situation, but I'll take the word of the women that have been there. But for me, I have to recall a story that happened to me when it made me decide to go to Masters in Economics. I went to this event for Association of Economics in 2005, December, and there was two ladies, very phenomenal ladies, one Saudi and one Emirate. They were both in stock market, and probably they are, it's well known here, Nahid Tahir and Suha Najjar. And they were talking about the Saudi stock market that was peaking to 20,000 points at that point, and they were talking about the bubble. And the market is in a bubble situation, and they have their own charts and tools explaining how is it going to explode. And then there was a businessman who just made fun out of this, their fear, and they said, you are just being fear and the market is okay. And he just cracked all this, the stage with everybody just starting laugh for his comment. And the two ladies just chime in. They didn't just prove their word or their tools or their conclusions. 3 months later, the Saudi market just fell to 8,000 points. And to be honest, the next year they apologized that they mocked them for their work. For me is that I wish that actually their body language was shy. They just said as if they made a terrible suggestion that the stock market is a problem. So my problem is that when I don't like the term woman-man thing, I think a confident woman would support her word and and defend her place and word, and everybody else will respect that, and she will be heard. She wouldn't be identified as a woman, as you did last night with the session. I don't think anybody identified you as a man or a woman. You're just a professional who were doing your work. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Muwaffaq Al-Hashmi. I'm not really intruding, but I'm just giving a small case study that I've been through. I wish many of my fellow countrymen were here also to see and measure what I've done before. Since 1988, I started employing female staff within my business. And I faced many challenges, social, ethnic, religious, and we went through a big curve and we learned through it. And the result is where I have a real estate development company. And today where we are is that I said I'm going to found this company based on equality in terms of product, meaning that every shopping mall, every office building, every complex that we build takes into consideration female aspects and male aspects, and social, religious aspects, and we're very successful in doing that. We have many examples on the landscape, gigantic, very big ones as well, like Red Sea Mall, like Kings Road Tower. We have toilets for women, okay, on every floor. So we've put that in consideration. Also, we hired sales staff, and at the beginning of our establishment, they were looked at as bimbos. I'm sorry to say that, but it's like, oh, you're hiring women to attract men, to come and invest. And so we took them out and we put them as managers. And then we had the males fight with their managers. I'm not going to listen to a lady giving me orders. So, okay. So we went through much more in terms of screening and developing skills of our female staff. We have women that apply for management jobs, and they're either too overqualified or extremely underqualified. We have people applying for secretarial jobs, and we found that they're overqualified. So what we do is we take them, we train them, we develop their skills, and we make them into at least middle management or above. So over the 26 years that I've been doing this, we're very successful. We've had many very well-known female managers leave the company and go and start their own businesses, which I'm very proud of. And as we speak today, at this moment, we're still doing that. And we're taking into consideration that they're half the society, but then again, we have this genuine issue, femininity versus chaperonism, and we're always going to face this, but we just have to live with it through evolution. And the subject here is promoting career opportunities for women or young women, and we're doing that as it is today. Thank you for listening to me.
That's exactly a case study for how you bring women into the workforce in Saudi Arabia, and it begins with CEO backing and management backing, and then identifying what levels of the organization women are involved in, and then giving different interventions in each. So at Nesma, for example, we have a women's forum, and this is an annual opportunity for all the women in the company to come together in 2 locations. And yes, in that forum, we work on women issues like empowerment and self-confidence and time management and work-life balance. But having that forum sends messages to the women themselves that this company cares about you, and to the other managers who have to release their women for a day, that women matter in this company and that they need to do something about it. And so I think that this is an exact case of how you can be effective. You need to constantly look at where things are going well and where things aren't, so that you can look at how you can improve them. So we had an example of a case in our lower management, or sorry, not management, our lower jobs, where the women were coming in and they were constantly distracted by زوجي وعيالي وشغلي, basically they were always finding ways and reasons not to be in the office, even though they actually wanted to be there. So what we realized was that they didn't have any experience prior to this job that would help them to do well in this job. And we pilot tested a program that ended up being super successful, and we're planning on rolling it out much larger, which was we launched a course called Family Management. And the course بالعربي is إدارة الأسرة. And what we did was we introduced the concept that أنت مديرة أسرتك. Yeah? You are the manager of your family. And when you start, that changes their perspective of themselves. Rather than being, you know, I'm just like a woman sitting at home and drinking tea and my kids are running around me and it's chaotic, I actually have a say in what happens in my home. And we gave them tools to organize their relationships at home with their children, with their husbands, with their, you know, the housekeepers, tools to organize their family responsibilities and the occasions. And by the end of the course, we found that they started to care more about how can we become better workers? How can we do better at the job, at the office? How can we have better relationships with our colleagues? So I think that this is just a case to show that when you segregate the women and see what each woman needs, you come up with creative ideas to empower each group. And it ends up helping them to take it to the next level.
Great presentation, Anna and Noura. My name is Omar Al-Ghali. I'm from the Center for Innovative Government Management. My name is Omar Al-Ghali. I'm from the Center of Innovative Government Management. I agree with you about your comment regarding feminization of certain jobs, but the problem that this policy came from the Ministry of Labor as to correct an old poor policy that required companies to have a separate door for women and a separate section. So if I'm building a new organization and then I'm building a separate door for women and a separate section, I have to have some rough idea how many women I'm going to hire. So that's a really huge problem. A lot of the policies that are had been done by the Ministry of Labor recently, they were like policies to correct all poor policy instead of just reversing them and canceling them. So one of the biggest problems that now, and I was part of 2 startups in the last 7 months, is that how many, when we are building the organization, the building, how many offices should we like separate for women? Because I don't know how many women I'm going to hire in the first place and how many men.
I think the challenge of how you organize the workspace is you have the experts here all wanting to raise their hands and answer from the Chamber of Commerce.
One more time, was it about the segregation in the workplace? Basically, the new regulations from the Ministry of Labor, first of all, so everybody knows, before 2005, yes, there was a regulation in the labor law that says there has to be complete segregation between genders in the workplace and all surrounding areas. In 2005, the new labor law, that clause was number 160, has been removed. Therefore, all the new regulations issued by the Ministry of Labor does not require that you have a separate elevator and separate entrance and all that. What it requires is that you have an area designated for women, okay, with a private bathroom, okay? So designated, you can interpret that differently according to the space availability. So in some companies here, we have an open space, so this corner is dedicated for women, okay, but they can meet. And what the regulations are written now is to prevent isolation between gender, but not to prevent mixing between gender. So, ما في خلوة. So if there's a meeting, keep the door open, if it's in a glass room. So there's a lot. If you want any time, we can communicate with you further to better explain it. Now, this does not mean that the Ministry of Labor's inspectors completely understand that. And this is why you, as a private sector, have to be extremely aware, and your employees aware, and your HR aware. So if you get, for example, the religious vice, and they say, you know, you're not supposed to do this, there's a law that says they're not supposed to interfere because this is the Ministry of Labor. So you need to educate yourself as a private sector. Second thing is any problems with the inspectors themselves, you have to communicate it to the ministry. You can do it through us, or you can do it directly to the minister. Okay? On the website. The Ministry of Labor's website, which is www.mol.gov.sa, and the minister has his email on there. And I don't work for the ministry, but the ministry is right here next to the ministry.
Hi, I'll try to be very brief. I have a couple of hats. One is I'm running the accelerator program in King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. And the other is I'm a consultant and an advisor to a women-only investor network in Turkey. And one of the biggest challenges I always had, when you say women-only investing network and try to recruit influential women to mentor, to guide, and to invest in women, I always get criticized because I'm diversification in women. Why do you mean women only? Women are equal as men. So I get criticized because I'm very selectively choosing women. And on the other hand, I'm getting very criticized because I'm not selecting women. So it's very tricky not to select women and be criticized of being a sexist, and select women and not become a sexist as well. So some women are very, very outright and saying, you never say women only investing. They are equal. But then I don't think they're equal, and we need to do something about it. But when you say it, then you sound something of a politician, which is not the case. So how can a man create a balance between helping women and trying to be positively selecting women, and not also saying that they're positively selecting women? Yes, I mean, we say men with daughters or men with conscious. So we're not discriminating a lot. We have, like me, I'm advising them. At least I have a daughter, I'm qualified in that sense. But it's very difficult to not be discriminating and make every woman happy, because sometimes women are not wanting to be discriminated against other women as well. So it's very, very tough to balance.
I mean, that's a topic that's always gonna be there. Yeah. No matter how sophisticated and advanced the society, you always run into that same issue, and it's always also it's an argument that where you can just hit and then all discussion is dead because you say no, oh, we're discriminating against this or the man or the women, yeah? And then you can stop discussing because there's no way out of it. So I would suggest, I mean, accept it as a side effect that when you talk about gender equality or advancing women in the workplace, there will always be the notion of preferring the one or the other to find a balance. But I mean, maybe to give you a very easy answer, a balance is not a steady state. A balance, a balance comes from an up and down, which goes all the time. I think that's probably the best answer I can give.
I think one of the reasons that the challenges that you're facing is that people, as individuals, have a different understanding of their own identity. And I read a book that was written by a white American male who said that he was listening in a conversation when a white woman said, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman. And the black woman looked at the woman and said, that's interesting. When I look in the mirror, I see a black woman. And so the writer, who was white American male, said, I look in the mirror and I see a person. So every person, their identity is created by their own experiences. And that's why you will find that some women don't want to be considered women and they want to just be a human. And another person, for her identity as a woman or as a black woman or as an Arab or as a Muslim, that's why I think you're in this state, but it doesn't mean you should stop, right? Keep going.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Suad. I'm an ex-Aramco employee. My problem is probably different than anybody else here because I worked for 25 years. We worked together, men and women. I never knew anything different than that. And it's true, we struggled and we did our best to be in better positions and higher positions with Aramco. I think my shock is after quitting Aramco, I realized that our society is completely the opposite. That we have to start from square one, how to start mixing women with men at work. And that really, took me like 20 or 30 years back, And I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that this is what's happening in my country. And I believe after working all these years with Aramco, I never thought there is men and women. It's just who is better, who is the best person for that position. That's all. And it's been a struggle since I left Aramco up to date. Every time you talk to somebody, they feel like I wanted to apply for some jobs. I thought like with all this knowledge, we're great, we're way ahead, better than anybody else or something. They keep saying, oh no, sorry, you're overqualified. So you don't know, you are overqualified, you're underqualified, you're a woman, all kind of excuses. They don't want to say, you are a woman and you scare me, you might take my place. And that's the real thing. Thank you, guys.
We'll hire you. Come to Nesma.
Any more questions?
Actually, I agree with you, ma'am. The men has the guerrilla, characteristics, so they always love to be in control of things. The ego, right, exactly, that's the word I was looking for. I'm personally doing cultural dialogue, and I have very pleasant experience with women, and I'm very glad that Roman, our website developer, our website master, is among us here today. Give us a big hand of applause. She was able to do a fascinating work to bring the world together under our website. I think we need to push more on bringing cases, successful stories from Nesma perhaps, and NCB and Aramco of how they mixed the women and men together in workplaces, and the others will follow. The change is happening, and it will happen.
regarding my question about women and the segregation and the doors, I failed to mention that I came from Hali, Riyadh. It's a complete Riyadh, so it's a completely different city with a completely different culture. And my question to Noura Hina, do you think women in the workplace face the same challenges in Riyadh or Sharqiya or Jeddah? Do they have the same challenges or completely different challenges?
They used to be my bosses, so I always defer to them, even that after I left the chamber. So I'm sure they will have an answer as well. My perspective, because Nesma is in Jeddah and in Riyadh and in Khobar, our experience at Nesma has been that the environment in Jeddah here, Jeddah غير, Jeddah غير, Jeddah غير, has made people believe in إحنا غير. So therefore, we do things without even checking whether or not we can, because we're like, oh, this is how it should be, or this is how it can be. My experience has been that in Riyadh, people are more afraid to hire women because they don't know and they don't have as many examples that they can look at. However, it doesn't mean that the regulations are different and that you cannot hire there, but you can hire here. So I think if you get that out of your mind, this whole, the social barrier, then you will be able to do it. And one of the things we're doing at Nesma is we're actually sending someone from Jeddah in HR to Khobar and to Riyadh to help them bring the women in because they're not really sure how to go about doing it.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Anas bin Dawood. Just I want to share my experience about the gear I'm hiring in all over our branch, ladies in the cashier. So just getting to the point, I'm facing a problem in a different place, in Jeddah, in Mecca, and I have in Medina also, and in Khobar and in Riyadh. As he said, really there is difference between everywhere, between every place or between every city. In Jeddah, as you said, Jeddah ghair, no one have any problem. I'm not facing any problem, especially in Jeddah. But in the other cities, I'm facing, especially maybe the culture and the difference between the area, something like that. So this is the point.
You can overcome. You can overcome these challenges. I'll give you an example from 2006 in Jizan. So Jizan, right? And we always look at Jizan and Jizan اللي غير, basically. I walked into the, I was doing research for my master's. And someone spread a rumor that I'm not doing research, that I'm here as a representative of a company and I'm hiring women. So I walked into the clinic where it was like a doctor's clinic, and that's where I was doing my interviews. And the room was overflowing with women. And I went in to see the doctor, and the doctor said, oh my God, I had a feeling, I thought there was an epidemic in the village or there was something, they were all sick. But alhamdulillah, they're here only to see you because they hear you're here, you're giving them jobs. So this was in 2006 in a very, very small village اسمها جوز الجعافرة في محافظة صبية في منطقة جازان. I don't feel that there are obstacles that women don't want to work or they cannot work anywhere, honestly, in Saudi Arabia. It's just you have to be maybe creative in different environments. Maybe not the same way that you recruit in Jeddah will be effective in Khobar or in Mecca or in Abha.
Just to clarify, يعني ما شاء الله Noura answered it, but just to clarify the Jeddah غير part, because we, هنا center is in Jeddah, so every time we go and lobby and with any ministry in the meetings, they're like, no, but you guys, because you're from Jeddah, it's different. So we decided to do a research nationwide in 9 cities with a sample size of 3,000 people, just to make sure is Jeddah غير ولا Jeddah is not غير. And we were asking both men and women regarding women's participation, driving, everything you could imagine. We had amazing results that Breda, Waneza, Al-Qasim, Riyadh, Sharqiya, they have similar ideology when it comes to women's issues, and it's much more positive than people tend to believe. يعني حتى they want 47%, they want the وزيرة, they want الدبلوماسية. يعني we have high numbers there that proves otherwise. بس في ناس صوتهم أعلى. They just have higher voices of saying, no, we don't want women, or they don't accept it. But reality with the research that we have, it's just not there. It's the same. It's the same as everybody else when it comes to that. It's just they have a different ideology with it.
You want to just lens this, and then I think we have to end the session.
I agree with you what you said, but the problem which I'm facing exactly from the culture, first of thing, and in some places or in some cities, I feel that the labor policy is different or something like that. This is my problem, what I'm facing. But I already, I'm planning to make, I already distribute all the girls, all the lady all over my branch. I don't have problem on that. But I said what I'm facing, the problem exactly, the culture and the policy is not clear in everywhere. This is what I'm facing the problem until now, until up to the date.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I would also like to address my words of thanks to all of you participants who came here. Thank you for this lively discussion. I thank again Ambassador Kulach from the European Union, and special thanks also to our colleagues on the floor. I think it was quite an interesting talk, and we got a lot of different perspectives. And I just would like to say thank you again, and I wish you a pleasant continuation of the conference. Thank you very much.